Previously on Higurashi when they cry Kai, Chapter 8.
コーヒーは後よ。状況を。本当なの？
はい。午前4時15分。沖宮署内で身元不明死体が R であるということが確認されたという情報が入りました。
It has begun.
そんなわけないでしょ。だって R は風邪で寝込んでいるんでしょ。それはあんたたちが監視してたんでしょ。
サンサ、話に続きがありまして、沖宮署の諜報員によると死後48時間が経過しているとか。
Takano could feel her blood freezing, starting from her feet. She just couldn't believe what was happening. At least 48 hours? At least 40 hours since the death of the Queen Carrier? Takano just couldn't understand. Fisticuffs! Well, to be fair, I wasn't expecting a full-on Ushi booby attack either. So you haven't abandoned that name after all. Takano-san's objective is the execution of the emergency manual. Its premise is about to be destroyed, and that's why she is panicking. She finally found someone who showed an interest in her research, which made her feel better about herself. Yet that someone is about to cut her off, and that's why she's panicking. She's as pitiful as can be. If it were possible, if there was a way to reach out to her, I would reach out to save her from drowning. But my hand will never reach. It won't reach her unless she reaches out. Tomotaki didn't grin. After all, trains don't grin! Give me a pen. Give me a can of spray paint. I can fix that. More boob attacks! Yuri didn't miss his last chance to escape, but he still had to do his final job. Yuri picked up the phone at his desk, called Rika's home number, and left. It would continue to ring like that, sounding the emergency signal. Yuri thought back to when he wondered how long he was going to stay in this director's room. He never knew this day would come so suddenly. He noticed a framed picture of his parents on his desk. Yuri had become a doctor so he could clear up the misunderstanding between his parents and regain his family ties. But how did he get involved in something like this? No. He would return. He would return and continue the fight against Hinamizawa syndrome. He vowed to himself that he would never abandon that responsibility.
Shion-san.
で、ケイちゃんに譲って私だけ生き残ったら、私はお姉に一生恨まれますって。私の思い人はもういないけど、お姉にはいるもん。
は？お前、この忙しい時に何の？
死ぬ気はないけど、シオンに伝えて。私たち、また次の時も双子がいいね。
行け！
いくつもの大切なことを学び、ようやくこの世界で最も大切なことを学び取りました。私たちが求めてやまず、そしてようやく得たもの、それが何かわかりますか
？It was how to make a miracle happen. A miracle is like a number you get on a die. People think that the result of the roll depends on God's mood. God holds the key to miracles. Humans don't have the right to control them. But, although humans don't have the right, they can perceive. They can perceive how to improve their odds, and how they can make a miracle happen.
奇跡の起こし方。いいか、あなたはもう知っているはずです。私よりも先に知ったはずです。あなたが本当に大事にしたこの最後の世界で。
貴様らの条件を飲もう。この場は見逃す。ウルでリカは上がれ。タカのサンサがお前に用があると言っている。
では行ってきますですよ。ニパー。
And so it continues.
探しましたんで、リカさん。あなたは大事な身なんですから、急に姿を消されちゃたまりませんね。こいつはルール違反です。では、リカさんは診療所に来てもらいましょう。お前たちは行け。
The assault unit that led Rika away headed back into the basement. They were about to break the rules too.
約束を破る気ね。
約束？そりゃ何の話ですんね。おおっと、つったら本当に舌を噛まれちゃかないませんわ。おい。
As Rika tried to run, Okinogi grabbed her fragile arm. She fought back, but her resistance meant nothing against him. One of the mountain dogs took out a syringe from a case. It shouldn't kill her, but would probably put Rika to sleep. Takano, after all, didn't need a chatty Rika. She just needed a live queen carrier. If Rika got that shot, that will mean the end of this world. Before Rika could scream, the other dog covered her mouth. The dog with the syringe drew closer to Rika's arm. Akasaka! Rika was being grabbed from behind, and her mouth was covered. There was no way for her to fight. I believe. Even if I'm asleep, I believe. Rika kept repeating that in her mind. She believed that someone would wake her up. And that the first thing she'd see when she opened her eyes would be her beloved friends. It happened all of a sudden. Akasaka? The man with the syringe spun twice in the air and dropped to the ground. Nobody, including Okinogi, could understand this sudden phenomenon. It defied the very laws of physics. Rika couldn't understand either. The man who was holding Rika from behind spoke up. Akasaka! His voice had such a heavy feeling imbued in it.
数えきれない世界で後悔した。いつも気づくときには手遅れだった。
お前、誰だ?
The others took a few steps back, away from Rika and the man holding her. There are many units within the Mountain Dogs, so often its members don't remember each other's faces. There were just too many units, so nobody really paid attention. All the Mountain Dogs were more or less well built. But this man had an excellent physique. Even Okinogi noticed that he'd never seen anyone like that in one of his units before. Rather, he actually wanted to recruit him. But...
私がずっとリカちゃん、君を助 助けに来た。
Hell yeah! The hands that were holding Rika left her shoulders. They left ever so gently. And as soon as they did, they transformed into a pair of furious fists, which implanted themselves in the faces of men attacking him from behind. They flew through the air. Akasaka hit those two men without even turning around. 5 members of the Mountain Dogs surrounded Akasaka. However, he didn't even see them. He could only feel the deep emotion of finally being able to do what he had been longing to. And the 5 of them sensed it. That maybe, just maybe, he didn't even care that they were there. What a beautiful facial expression you're sporting right now. It suits you. On Okinogi's signal, the 5 Mountain Dogs bore down on Akasaka. Rika dropped to the ground. Akasaka was left standing. Akasaka, who came back to keep a promise he made with a girl 5 years ago. But his promise was worth more than 5 years. Rika knew that. Akasaka probably understood it too. The promise went back 100 years. For 100 years, he regretted not being able to save her from the conspiracy. He believed that one day there would be a miracle and he could travel back to this day. That was why he continued to train himself. His strong will and Rika's wish made that miracle happen. That one and only miracle allowed Akasaka to be here in Hinamizawa in June 1983. The first one went down in the time it took Okinogi to blink. Lowering himself to grapple Akasaka had proven fatal. He wasn't so soft as to let such perfect openings go by. Akasaka's hand smashed into the back of the man's head. His blow was powerful enough to smash a pillar of ice or shatter a mountain of tiles. As it happened, Akasaka was holding back a little so that his target wasn't too injured. Who the fuck are you? I didn't know we had a narrator standing up by. Or do you just follow around Akasaka, waiting for just the perfect moments for him to start delivering cans of whoop-ass on people? Akasaka's well-trained fists continued to knock down the Mountain Dogs, 1 member for every time Okinogi blinked. 1 hit per opponent was all Akasaka needed. This was the true essence of karate. Akasaka's colleagues praised and feared his power. His weapons were useless against him. No matter how hard his victim tried to protect himself, it meant nothing to Akasaka. But he was too strong for the Mountain Dogs to even understand that. It was as if he was a giant and they had to crane their necks up to see. Akasaka didn't even give them time to think. Someone from the Mountain Dogs must have called for backup. About a dozen more members had arrived. As Rika stayed low to the ground, she picked up a stick and started to carve into the dirt. That made Okinogi even angrier, but he calmed himself down. Then, the warrior's intuition resting Okinogi's blood came to a realization. Numbers didn't matter. Even the full force of the Mountain Dogs wouldn't be able to defeat this monster. They just really love shilling your skills, don't they, Akasaka? This freaking universe, I mean. All the combat units were still down in the basement. There was no way they could take him.
ってことはよ、戦闘職の俺しか勝負にならねえってことじゃねえか。
The grudge match I predicted, it's happening.
それに、お前の顔。こいつは懐かしい顔だ。たくましくなったじゃねえか。
貴様、まさか。
標準語じゃ思い出せねえか。なら鉛で話してやるぜ。すったら懐かしか。あん時の青二歳がよくもここまで立派になったもんよ。
It had been 5 years. This was the man Akasaka fought when he was investigating the kidnappings of the minister's grandson. Akasaka had still been inexperienced then.
あん時は手加減せん指示だったん。サービスもしたらった。だがな、今日はそういうわけにはいかんね。
Fine by him, I'm sure.
あの樽男も助けに来ねえぞ。しかし、この5年でだいぶ鍛えよったんだ。俺は嬉しいんで、俺はこういうのを期待しとったんよ。この5年間な。お前ら手を出すな。俺の獲物だ。
And this is going to be a big mistake for you, but very beneficial for me. Okanogi took off all of his equipment and threw it on the ground. He loosened his one button and then positioned himself. Seeing that, Akasaka realized he was somewhat capable, and narrowed his eyes in vigilance. Okanogi took that as an insult. That Akasaka only thought he was somewhat capable. His behavior was telling Okanogi that he viewed him on the same level as the other small fry. Nice pose. Akasaka first moved to take up his stance and avoid getting Rika involved. Akasaka hadn't even moved one bit until just then. Okanogi could easily see that Akasaka was extremely strong. But at the same time, he thought he would be fairly simple to take down. Karate may be a martial art, but nowadays it was just a sport. The army combat Okanogi trained in was completely different. Obviously, Akasaka had studied a lot, but it's all just child's play. All he learned were routine moves and forms. Besides, karate moves are fairly straightforward. Okanogi was confident that he could fight any karate pro and win. Okanogi started leaning onto his toes and using his meticulous footwork. In contrast, Akasaka still hadn't moved from his back stance. Akasaka was acting as if Okanogi's footwork was simply a trick, which infuriated Okanogi. Okanogi moved fiercely and nimbly, in a manner completely different from how Akasaka was moving earlier. Akasaka remained calm, but Okanogi saw it differently. He can't react to my movements, so he's prepared to take damage in order to deal more. Akasaka couldn't defend himself from Okanogi's quick jab, and it connected with his face. It was a quick but light attack. Its purpose was to distract Akasaka and create an opening for Okanogi. Okanogi knew that Akasaka would use his arms to guard his face instinctively. Okanogi's real purpose was to attack his abdomen, which would then be unguarded. Of course, Akasaka didn't have enough time to guard himself. It took more than just good kinetic vision to prevent his attack. Only Okunogi, who trained for many years, had perfected the speed of that technique. Normal people would struggle helplessly while vomiting if they were to experience Okunogi's kick. It could even rupture internal organs. So it was pretty amazing Akasaka was still on his feet.
どうした空手相手も同じ流派じゃないと戦えないってのか何
Akasaka mumbled something, but Okunogi couldn't hear. Actually, he did hear it. But Okunogi never imagined he could say such a thing in this situation. So he couldn't hear it. He couldn't comprehend it.
貴様の一撃は相手を打ち倒すことしか考えていない。だから重さが宿らない。
は？何をバカなこと言ってやがる。
空手は心を養う。人を打つということは自らも打たれることを知るということだ。自らの一撃が相手に何を起こすか。人は打つのだ。打たれる意味を知るのだ。だからそれに至らない貴様の一撃には重みが宿らない。
それは俺が未熟だということか。
I believe that is exactly what he's saying, Mr. Gardner. Okunogi attacked Akasaka again, but this time, Akasaka was different. Akasaka blocked Okunogi's fists and legs. Of course, Okunogi was still the only one attacking. But Akasaka had started to become much more aggressive. Now, as Okunogi attacked, his hands and legs were being injured. Okunogi instinctively sensed that he was in trouble. He thought Akasaka was just a police officer, but his movements were too dangerous. He was merciless. He was dangerous. So Akasaka's training and experience must far surpass Okunogi's. I repeat, Akasaka is the best damn cop in all of Japan. Not even a trained mercenary soldier like this asshole here can stand against him. Wait, that dynamic heel kick isn't karate, is it? Akasaka's heel kick missed Okunogi's head by a millimeter.
空手以外にもやってやがるな。
いいや、私は空手しかやっていない。
嘘つくんじゃねえ。さっきから明らかに空手じゃ見たことねえ技が目立つぞ。
Okunogi was starting to become impatient. The reason Okunogi ridiculed martial arts as sports was because they were all hard-headed and only used set moves. This is how you strike in karate. This is how you punch in boxing. This is how you throw in judo. It's easy to learn, and that's why it's easy to win. But Akasaka was different. He said that he only did karate, and he must have spent unthinkable hours training. Well, considering that he's in a fight for his and a whole bunch of other people's lives right now, fighting by the book is very unwise. Yet, he was flexible enough not to be confined only by formatted moves. That was understanding at a spiritual level. The spirit of martial arts isn't just forms. One simply learns forms to reach that spiritual level. Therefore, for one who has reached it, there are no forms. What Akasaka had was a philosophical spirit.
貴様の未熟さには落胆した。
I'm about to school your ass in philosophy. Akasaka stepped away from his original spot for the first time. He moved forward. He filled the space between Okinogi and himself with his inescapable conviction. As Akasaka walked closer to Okinogi, Akasaka's assault radius tried to swallow him whole. To be within that radius meant death. Okinogi walked backwards to avoid being in that radius. That was a result of his clear-headed judgment. Not because he was scared.
人を撃つ意味のわからない貴様に本当の重さというものを教えてやる。
As Okinogi moved backwards, his back hit the van he came in earlier. He was cornered. Having your back to a wall didn't mean you were at a disadvantage, but the more it was pressed against that wall, the further a disadvantage it became. If Okinogi let Akasaka come any closer, Okinogi wouldn't be able to take a combat stance. Okinogi decided it immediately. The last chance he had was the moment before Akasaka took his next step. Akasaka's foot left the ground. He was taking another step. Now! No tricks, no feints. Okinogi lowered himself and attacked with everything he had. The attack was powerful enough to break Akasaka's ribcage and rupture his heart. I'm a professional, Okinogi told himself. I can't be defeated by this amateur.
そりゃよかったな。給料いくら？
At that moment, Akasaka's eyes opened wide. Beautiful. All the mountain dogs heard a noise. It wasn't the noise of people fighting. It was the noise of a traffic accident. That's certainly one hell of a way to describe it. Okinogi's blow missed by a slight amount, but Akasaka's fist struck inches away from Okinogi's face. There was a dent in the sliding door of the van. The windows on both sides had shattered, and it looked like the van was in an accident. Fuck! Was it even possible for a human fist to do this? Yeah, it's possible, but it could very well hurt you like a motherfucker. Time resumed its flow, and Oki knelt down, falling to the ground. Akasaka didn't miss on purpose. Akasaka couldn't control his fist because he put everything into one blow. Okinogi should thank Akasaka. If Akasaka had been able to control his attack better, Okinogi's face would have ended up like the van. However, although it didn't hit Okinogi's face, it shattered his spirit.
Akasaka! Pachi 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 pachi!
Indeed. Rika applauded. But in this situation, it didn't sound like applause. It almost sounded like Akasaka's fine spirit was popping like firecrackers. Akasaka pulled back his fist, turned around calmly, and spoke.
次だ。面倒だから一度に。
They knew. Everyone knew that there was no way to defeat Akasaka with their bare hands. They realized they needed weapons. They also needed more people. There should be a better equipped unit in the basement. All of a sudden, things began to move quickly. The remaining mountain dogs emerged from the basement.
地上での発砲は許可されていない。繰り返す。地上での発砲は不可。大鳥は R を回収して退却許可を。
When the mountain dogs who just witnessed Akasaka's battle against Okinogi realized it was time for them to run. They didn't even care about Rika. Who would even think of taking Rika from him after seeing what Akasaka was capable of doing? When Okinogi regained his awareness, he jumped into a van with the mountain dogs as it drove away. Since Okinoki took off his intercom device to fight with Akasaka, he had no idea what had transpired in the basement. What happened? After the mountain dogs broke their promise with Rika, they were supposed to round up the remaining club members. But when Akasaka showed up, the dogs had to be divided into a ground force and a basement force, which altered the situation. Kasai had gone on a counterattack, and the other club members somehow climbed up from the well and helped him. Plot magic, that's what got them up. Since the mountain dogs weren't allowed to fire on the surface, they realized it would make the situation worse if Kasai fired his guns once he came up after them. Okinoki was unreachable, so Nightingale 1 had ordered the retreat in his place. Who would bear the responsibility for this? It was probably Okinoki's fault for taking off his intercom device to fight against Akasaka, as he basically abandoned his job as commander. I suppose technically that's true. But everything happened in the first place because Akasaka showed up. How about that, Akasaka? You managed to royally fuck up a genocidal paramilitary operation just by showing your presence. You're not just the best damn cop in Japan. You are a god on legs. So maybe it was his triumph, rather than Okinoki's blunder. Either way, everything was miraculous. But the mountain dogs hadn't run with their tails between their legs. Oh, yes they did. They had simply retreated for the moment. When they returned, they would have enough men and arms, ready to kill all who stand in their way. And that would happen very soon. Then we need to get the fuck out of here and regroup. There was no time to waste. In the basement, the club members were talking about their grand counterattack. Rika was a little disappointed that she couldn't have joined them, but she was happy that Akasaka told her what she had been waiting to hear. Rika told him about how heroic he had been, and he got a little embarrassed. Kasai was doing alright, but Shion wasn't doing too well. Of course, it wasn't life-threatening, but she couldn't hear well in her left ear, possibly due to being so close to an explosion. To test her hearing, Mion went around to Shion's left side and whispered some dirty words. She seemed to be able to hear them fairly well. Oh, Mion. Don't ever change. Of course, she might have been hearing through her left ear, though. Shion decided to lie down on a tatami mattress in the torture room, while Irie kept an eye on her. Mion was very worried, but Shion told her that she was okay, and forced her to go ahead with the next operation. Mion complained that Shion didn't understand her feelings. Now they would have to come up with an idea to rescue Tomotaki from the clinic. They had Akasaka and Kasai on their side, both of whom were used to battles. Also, they had Irie, who knew about the secret basement of the clinic. They would have to get moving quickly, but they had to at least have a plan. It was almost 10:30 a.m. Because of what they had gone through, they were exhausted, and it felt like it was almost evening. But they were at school. But if they were at school, it would only be second or third period. They had to pull themselves together. They had to regain their fighting spirit. Irie checked Shion's left ear for penlight.
耳鼻科の先生でないとわかりませんが、運が悪ければ鼓膜が破れている可能性もあります。
Well, if that's true, that fucking sucks.
頭痛やめまいはありますか？
いいえ、全然へっちゃらです。
Irie wet his handkerchief and wiped Shion's face gently.
驚いてます？ひなみ沢ファイターズのマネージャーに銃撃戦ができて。
ええ、驚いています。あなたが死ぬ気だったとは前原さんに聞きましたよ。
うわ、ああいう言葉ってその場ではかっこいいけど生き残っちゃうとめちゃくちゃ恥ずかしいですね。やだな。
What's embarrassing about it? It was noble. If something happens to you and I live, my sister will never forgive me for that. I don't have my loved one anymore, but Sis does.
茶化しっこなしです。
I don't mean to tease you.
あなたの思い人というのはサトシ君のことですね。
さあ、どうでしょうね。今頃どこにいるやら。生きてるのか死んでるのかもわかりませんけど。
生きています。
He is?
え？
Shion's thoughts stopped in their tracks when Irie answered immediately.
北条サトシ君は生きています。彼は去年のあの日、不幸な心労がたたり、末期の発症を迎えてしまったんです。
Mia and the other club's members had already told Shion about the current situation, so she kind of understood what he meant.
私はサトコちゃんと同じ薬で治療できると思いました。ですが、サトコちゃんが治療できたのは極めて幸運なケースだったようで、サトシ君の治療は困難を極めました。そしてその治療は今も続いているのです。
サトシ君。サトシ君。
Yeah, apparently he's actually alive.
生きてるの。
Well, holy fucking shit. I've never been more happy to be wrong.
今まで話せなくてすみません。サトシ君は四角角にいます。
To think that all this time he was figuratively and literally right under our noses. Shion and Irie returned from the torture room. Shion looked very serious, as if she had gained the determination to fight. Keiichi and the others were just talking about how the enemy found where they were.
入江先生の着衣に発信機か何かがつけられていることは考えられませんか？
Thank you for thinking of that, because as a matter of fact, there is.
先生の私服ではなく診療所で持たされるものや着せられるものにです。
だとするとこの白衣くらいですが。
I feel a sneeze coming on.
ちょっとボディチェックします。
And it's gone, I think. Shion checked Irie over like an inspector at an airport. Then she found a little button on the backside of his collar. It was a little round button. There was no reason why a button like this would be on the back of the collar.
こいつが発信機でしょう。連中はこいつを信頼してるから直接尾行しなくてもここを突き止められたんです。やられたわ。となりゃこのボタンがある限り陽動作戦が可能になるってことだね。
Exactly. So I'd think very carefully about how you're going to use that. My first thought would be to just leave it here and let them think that we're still holding up inside here. Come back, and then when they come back and realize we're not, then, well, while the majority of their forces are here, we could go all the way to the other side of town to the clinic, and while the clinic isn't heavily guarded, we sneak in and rescue Tomitaki.
ボタンを持った踊り隊が敵をおびき寄せ、その隙に手薄の診療所を襲い、富武さんを助け出す。
Kasai is my avatar in this conversation. Listen to him.
それが最善でしょう。
となればそのお取り隊が陽動するには私の裏山が一番でございますわね。
Actually, that's even better. Traps galore.
そうだな、あそこなら敵を引っ張り回せるぜ。しかもあれだけの山だからな。敵も相当の手勢を集めるだろう。その分診療所がガラ空きになる。
読み切れないのはどの程度敵が診療所に残るかだ。
So we should prepare accordingly.
診療所には敵にとっても重要な富武氏がいる。相応の守備を残すため。
となれば富武より美味しい餌をおとりと一緒にするのがいいのです。
Rika?
大丈夫ですかリカ。
はいです。みんなと一緒で貞子の裏山なら絶対に捕まりませんです。
裏山に精通してるのはこの中では部活メンバーだけだね。おとりは部活メンバーが引き受けるといいかもしれない。
そうだね。その間に大人部隊は診療所を奇襲。翔さんは大丈夫？
赤坂さんのお目こぼしがあれば警察の方と聞いておりますので。
Kasai spoke while loading his shotgun.
今はオフですので。
Akasaka replied while checking an automatic pistol. He hadn't used this particular gun before, but he was used to handling guns. He was prepared to fire, too. Irie tried to memorize how to remove the safety, but he looked nervous.
赤坂さんは機関銃の経験は？
ありません。拳銃だけです。
では慣れたものがよろしいでしょう。弾倉は十分に。弾詰まりに備え同じ銃をもう一丁。
Sound advice.
笠井さんはこれはショットガンですか？
奇数発目はスラッグ弾です。面制圧も壁抜きもできます。
おお、散弾銃の立つって通り名は聞いてたけど本当にショットガン使いなんですね。
Plus, a shotgun would be a very reliable gun to have because there's a lot less components to the gun itself compared to an automatic weapon like a pistol or even a rifle. So, less things that could possibly go wrong with the gun itself in a fight.
散弾銃は恐ろしい武器です。ですから相手に当てずとも降伏させることもできます。あと皆さん防弾ベストがありますので着てください。
Kasai sounded very dependable, but at the same time he reminded everyone this operation would be a very dangerous one. It wasn't a simple fist fight. Even a veteran soldier can die in a gun battle. There is always a chance of death, regardless of how well trained you are. In fact, Kasai and Nakasaka were the only people who could be depended upon. Kasai talked Irie out of carrying a gun because it might be dangerous for him to have one. Give him a freaking baton or something, if you got one. Someone could get injured by friendly fire. Mion suggested that maybe there should be more people on the team, but both Kasai and Nakasaka refused because those who couldn't even handle guns at all might end up as dead weight.
なら私が行くしかないですね。第一、火力が足りなさすぎです。ファイヤーサポートに私がイングラムでも持ってきましょう。
でもシオン、お前耳大丈夫なのかよ？
ええ、もう治っちゃいました。ケロッとね。ご心配かけてすみませんでした。
シオン、今私が何て言ったか聞いてた？え？
嫌だな、聞こえてましたよ。
Mion had tricked her. Mion didn't say anything. Shion still couldn't hear out of her left ear.
シオン、
危険だよ。正直に言っておとりに混じるのも危険だと思ってる。シオンはどこかに身を隠してて。おねえ聞いて、私どうしても診療所に行かなければならない用事ができたの。でもそれを今話したら聡子まで来ると言い出す。それはダメ。こっちは室内戦、向こうも撃ってくる。それって。
Mion sensed it. She sensed the reason why Shion had to go to the clinic. That's why she didn't say anything more. If she was in Shion's position, she would go even if neither of her ears could hear.
危険ですわよ、シオンさん。考え直してくださいまし。聡子、シオンは救出隊に回る。聡子はおとり隊のエースなんだよ。自分の仕事に専念して。しーちゃん。レナさんならわかるよね。私が死ぬ気じゃないってこともね。うん、わかってる。こういう時の女の子ってね、絶対に死なないから。
I really beg to differ on that one.
ですよね。殺されたって死ぬもんか。
That's not how death works, Shion. But I appreciate your determination all the same. Shion and Reina gave each other a high five.
決まったようですね。では、もう動き始めましょうです。シー、ボタンをこっちで預かるです。はい、これ。頑張ってね、リカちゃま。シーも頑張って。シーが強く強く信じてきた奇跡だから。だから、きっとこれはシーのために神様が微笑んでくれたチャンスなのです。信じなかった日もあった気がする。それを誰かに諭された日もあった気がする。信じ続けるって大変なことだよね。でもあなたは信じ続けました。信じなかったことを悔い信じました。だから訪れた今日を呼び寄せたあなたの強い意志の前に、目の前の苦難はもはや苦難ではない。あんたお姉の新しい友達ですか？名前は知らないけどありがとう。うまくいきそうな気がします。うまくいきますですよ。お社様のお墨付きなのです。
The Mountain Dogs had retreated and reorganized their units. And I bet Miss Commander Lady is just throwing a fit right now. They were now ready to attack again. Takano was furious at them for not being able to bring R back to the clinic, even though they had her in their hands. She gave an order to capture her with all the Mountain Dogs' forces put together. Their vehicles were at the clinic, and they were all standing by for the order to attack. Takano wasn't the only one who was furious. Okanogi was as angry as her. That rookie policeman from 5 years ago had grown. He even made Okanogi yield. He couldn't accept that he was defeated, so he was bent on revenge. The reason why the order to attack was held off because the signal from the transmission device on Irie was momentarily interrupted. They interpreted it to mean that Irie had gone even further down into the basement. The Mountain Dogs assumed that the club members would go even further underground and try to escape by using some kind of secret passageway. That passageway couldn't be that long. They'd have to come up to the surface eventually. The Mountain Dogs were planning to catch them as soon as they surfaced. The villagers were too busy with finishing up for the festival, so they had no idea what was going on. By this time, the Mountain Dogs had shut down the telephone network. They were afraid the club members would call the police. The only way into the town was being watched by the blockade unit, so the club members couldn't escape that way. R and her friends had to come up to the surface. They couldn't be thinking of staying underground until things settled down. Their lifeline, Tomitaki, was in captivity. They couldn't be stupid enough to think of attacking the clinic to rescue him. I hate to break it to you, but we are just that level of stupid. And we're gonna make you regret underestimating our stupidity. More than likely, they would try to escape from the village on foot. They would probably call the police to help them. The patrol unit had several cars driving around the village, their eyes peeled for the signal of the transmitter or those on the run. It was time to wait patiently. The battle had returned to the starting point, and the balance of power was even again.
日割り強り定時連絡異常なし
いつまでも息を潜められるわけねえんだ。じれずに待て。絶対に出やがる。ところでうちのお姫様はどうした？
富武兄に尋問中です。どうやら説得を試みているようです。
こうなっちまったら穏便に済ませるには監査役を抱き込むほかねえからな。生かして捕らえたのはでかかったぜ。お姫様はいねえし、東京からの電話もねえ。ようやく落ち着いて冷房を浴びられるってもんだな。
Good for you.
隊長、東京から無線です。野村さんからサンサー宛てでなく隊長宛てです。
Oh?
やれやれ。電話がダメなら無線かよ。さて、東京の女王様がこの後に及んで俺に何のお話ですかね。山犬のおこのぎです。どうぞ。
Tomitaki was being held in a small meeting room. He was shoved under a desk. Couldn't you at least give him the decency of being restrained on top of a desk if you're going to put him anywhere above or below a desk at all? He was restrained so tightly that he couldn't even turn around. Takano was sitting in a chair next to the table, staring at a whiteboard. It outlined the research plan that was to be shut down. But Takano wasn't really reading it. She was just staring. Neither of them said a thing. Silence filled the meeting room.
もうすぐ11時ね。本当に今日は長い日。あんなにも早朝に起こされてからまだ半日も経たないのね。
Tomitaki didn't reply.
ジローさん、今からでも私に協力してはくださらない？山犬なんかいらない。あなたさえいてくれればいいわ。山犬には私の心を慰めることなんかできない。あなたの一見無神経な心遣いでしか慰められないってこの数日で分かったわ。二郎さんは分かってて私に無神経に接してくれてたのよね。変に同情しても何の役にも立たないならせめて私の心を気分転換で楽にさせてあげようと思って、そう思ってあんなに無神経を装ってでも私を楽しませてくれたのよね。高野三等陸佐として話してるんじゃない。高野美代として二郎さんに話してるの。それでも返事をしてはくれないの。
捕虜は名前と階級と認識番号しか喋っちゃいけないことになってるんでね。
Takano hung her head.
その手錠の鍵もうごめんなさい。
いいよ。それを求めたわけじゃないさ。
コーヒー飲む？
遠慮するよ。 この状態でトイレの世話になりたくないからね。
It was hardly a conversation, but Takano was happy that Tomomatake had finally replied. However, that wouldn't solve any of their problems.
僕を殺すしかないならそれも構わないさ。捕らえられた時にすでにその覚悟はできてる。
そうね。私も二郎さんを今夜あなたにその覚悟があって。
ならよかったよ。この覚悟が無駄にならなくて済む。
ねえ、死にたくないとは思わないの？あなたが私の味方になると誓ってくれれば、私はあなたを死なせずに済むの。上はあなたを生かす価値はないって言ってるけど、そこは私が何とかするから。
上は誰だい？
知らないわ。私と接触するエージェントは野村と名乗ってるけど、私も素性はよく知らないわ。
でも手を組む相手に足ると思う程度には話をしたんだろう。
数度ね。おしゃべりをしただけよ。今にして思うと私を利用したいという魂胆が見え見えだった。でもなぜかあの時は彼女だけが私のことを理解してくれるってそう思ったのよ。
わかるよ。君に誰かの助けが必要な時期があったことは知っている。その時君のそばにいるのが僕でありたかった。
そうね。そこにいたのが二郎さんだったらどんなに良かったことか。
まだ誰も死んでない。
これから殺すわ。
東京には君の黒幕もいればそれと対立する黒幕もいるが、ほとんどの上層部は今回の件をうやむやにして終わらせたいと思っているはずだ。高野さんはもう全てが手遅れだと思っているだろうけど、まだなんとかなるんだ。まだ取り返しがつく。なかったことにできる。
そうして祖父が築き上げたひなみ沢症候群の研究も
高野さん、君は何がどうなれば満足だったんだい？
Takano closed her eyes for a bit while she came up with an answer. Her grandfather's research had been insulted. She wanted those of higher positions of authority to take it seriously. Nomura could make that happen. When the final operation was enacted, the higher-ups of the country would have to read the article, and they would have to believe what's in it. They will authorize the execution of the emergency manual. And yes, that would create an irreversible disaster. But at the same time, the disaster would prove that her grandfather's article had merit. Proving its merit at the expense of thousands of lives.
それで君は満足だったね。
ええ、満足よ。それが高野美代の生を受けた理由だから。
前に聞いたね。なら君はこの作戦が終わったら消えてしまうわけだね。高野美代の目的は達せられ、地上からなくなり、君は本当の君に戻るんだ。田無美代子。それが本当の君の名前のはず。
How long had it been since she heard that name? Takano closed her eyes slightly.
そうね。私はもうすぐ田無美代子に帰るのね。
田無美代子という少女は両親を失って施設に送られた。そしてそこで不幸のどん底に落ちて死んだ。君は？
ええ、言ったわ。私はあの日のあの暗闇の中に戻ら。二郎さんは経験ある？
Takano told Tomomatake about her horrible experiences, which were simply unimaginable for normal people.
もう一度あそこに戻って、今度はおじいちゃんに助けられずに死ぬの。そうすれば私はここにいない。私がいなければ入駅感もなく、こんな妙な運命の行き止まりに迷い込むこともなかった。
君は死ぬ気だね。
作戦が終わったらいろいろとご褒美があることになってるけど、あまり信じてない。ある日突然ホームでドンと突き落とされるんじゃないかしら。
So on some level you did recognize that possible reality.
君には心を許せる味方はいないのか？
クライアントは所詮クライアント、味方じゃないわね。でも山犬は味方よ。彼らが私の靴を舐めたくなるくらいの金を弾んでやったからね。
でも心は許せないんだろ。
味方は味方よ。あなたを捕らえ、今から R たちも捕らえようとしている。私の役に立ってくれてるわ。
それは今の君に必要な味方じゃない。
そうね、今の私に必要な味方じゃない。
Takano paused. She paused because Toмотaki had just said exactly what she had been thinking. Since the day Toмотaki disappeared, she had been feeling restless. Takano had to admit that she needed Toмотaki.
ジローさん、山犬は何億円かのお金で転んでくれたわ。まだ私の手元には1億ちょっと残ってる。あなたはいくら払えば転んでくれるの？
君が一番欲しいものがいくらで買えるかを考えてみるといい。
こんな時にキザな例えだこと。お金では買えないって言わせたいのね。
Well, yes.
諦めるんだ。山犬は飼いならせても僕は飼いならせない。
それを転ばせたいと言ってるの？あなたが望むならお金だけじゃない、何でも与えるわ。私の髪の毛一本からつま先の先端まであなたのものにしていい。靴を舐めろと言うなら今この場で舐めてもいいわ。それでもまだ足りない。
Toмотaki didn't reply. It wasn't an affirmation by silence, but a signal to Takano that he had already told her everything he meant to say. And the most saddening form of silence for her.
あなたより毎朝早く起きて朝食を作るわ。待ち合わせ場所には必ずあなたより先に来る。二度とあなたを待たせて試すような真似をしない。それでもジローさん、
I really pity you. Toмотaki didn't say a word. He couldn't see her face under the desk, but he could sense it. This wasn't the time to say anything to her. Remaining silent was the only thing he could do. Suddenly, the phone rang. Takano sniffled once and picked it up.
高野よ。そう。わかったわ。今すぐ行くわ。
Takano stood up as she put down the phone.
R が発見されたわ。入江の発信機の反応も一緒。街道が封鎖されていることを知ってて、山中を徒歩で脱出するつもりのようね。山狩りには手こずりそうだけど、人目がないのは私たちに好都合だわ。じゃあね、二郎さん。なんとなくこれがあなたとできた最後のおしゃべりになるような気がする。最後にあなたから言葉がもらえなくて残念よ。
And still, Tomotaki stayed silent. Takano ran out of the room. She didn't look like she was hurrying back to work.
連中ははじめ近くの山中に出現し村中に出たようです。
I'll say this much. Like what he was saying before. This will only stop if you want it to stop, Takano.
村人に接触して助けを求めようとしたのかもしれませんが、偵察車両の1台が逃走車の一部と R を発見、追跡。一時期 R と発信機は別行動しましたが、地図の山中で合流しました。
チリジリになったのが合流できたということ？
ええ。連中は逃走路について十分な打ち合わせをしてやがったんちゅうことでしょうな。山の中なら地の利があると踏んでやがるに違いない。ブッシュが深ければ武器の効果は激減する。あの空手野郎の考えそうなことですね。
Okanogi was determined to catch them this time. He kept saying how he was simply caught off guard before.
今度はもう逃がせないわよ。ひなみ沢でならともかく、沖宮に入られたらもうどうにもならない。
分かってます。向こうに地の利がある山中とあっちゃ、こちらも躊躇したらアウトですが、全般で包囲圧殺します。聞こえてるな、全般。こいつはサッカーだ。敵はゴールエリアに侵入してる。ゴールは沖宮だ。絶対に許すな。特にあの空手野郎だ。絶対に仕留めてやる。大鳥了解。
ウグイス了解。
You know, if you really want to be absolutely certain that things won't go wrong and blow up in your face again, you shouldn't let a petty grudge influence your strategy here. Just saying. That's not exactly what I would consider strong or sensible military tactics, or strong or sensible tactics in general, for that matter.
ヒバリ了解。白鷺了解。行くぞ。山犬の総力戦だ。こいつがしくじれば、うちらは積まれてゲームオーバーだ。
その通りよ。もう後がない。私も出て陣頭指揮を取るわ。富武はここに置いていっても大丈夫？
大丈夫ですね。完全武装の保安隊員が8人もおりますね。その倍の完全武装兵が来てもしのげます。それよりも問題なのはあの空手野郎です。奴を侮ることはできませんぜ。
The security unit guarded the basement of the Erie Institute, which was the heart of the organization. Therefore, they were armed more heavily than anyone else in the Mountain Dogs. Okanogi's confidence in the security unit and his newfound obsession with defeating Nakasaka made the divisionary plan a success. But at the same time, that meant the decoy club members would have to deal with the full force of the Mountain Dogs. The dogs' white vans ran through the village. While they couldn't fire shots outside, all members were carrying stun guns that fired electric needles. While poor on range, they could subdue a target instantly. With the flip of a switch, they could change between merely stunning or killing their target. The perfect weapon for people like the Mountain Dogs. The vans separated into groups and headed for the mountains. They were planning to surround their enemies and then smoke them out.
隊長、前半作戦開始位置に到着しました。
さすがに展開が早いぜ。サンサ、全般にありがたい訓示を頼みます。
高野よ。R だけは生かして捕らえること。他は殺してしまっても構わないわ。この山から逃がしてはダメ。この山で今日の戦いすべてに決着をつけるのよ。
ウグイス、ヒバリ、白鷺、山狩りを開始しろ。大鳥はゴールキーパーで 予備兵力を務める。緊急展開が可能なように常時待機しろ。
大鳥セブン了解。
さあおっ始める。
The mountain dogs started marching, spreading out in a line with a few meters between them. This mountainside was a savage land where not even the villagers would dare tread. There were some trails, but no paved roads for human beings. It required an enormous amount of diligence and patience to hunt on a mountain like this. All the dogs were very nervous. They were told that most of their enemies were children, but there were a few well-trained adults with them as well. In addition, they were supposedly armed quite heavily, and they knew the layout of the terrain quite well. It was obviously going to be a tough battle.
おこのぎ、山狩りってのは普通どのくらいの人数がいるの？
一概には言えませんが、多ければ多いほどいいでしょうな。山犬の人数じゃ全員集めても全く足りません。
でも向こうも少人数なんだからそう不利な条件じゃないでしょ。ほらよく言うじゃない、守備を崩すには3倍の兵力がいるって。こっちはさらにその倍以上いるんだから。
まあ数万の兵力の場合ならそういう数式になるでしょうが。
It doesn't work in smaller scale battles. The US Armed Forces proved that in the Vietnam War.
なら今回の山狩り、おこのぎはどれだけの兵力がいると見てる
の？何でもありってことでですか？
何でもありって意味がわからないけど、どのくらいが適正な兵力なの？
今朝の政治的奇襲も含めて向こうの指揮官は相当優秀です。そして火器取り扱いのベテランが最低2、近接格闘のベテランが最低1。
そこまでは認めるけど、あとは所詮子供でしょ。
あとは子供のようですが、多分ここに逃げ込んだからには彼らのテリトリーでしょう。地の利が十分な子供一人はよく訓練された強襲偵察隊一個小隊に匹敵しますんで、サンサが考えてますより相当厄介な相手ですわ。
それを制圧するのにどの程度の兵力が必要だっていうの？
山岳歩兵が一個師団。ああ、師団ってのは山犬が3つ4つくっついて大隊、そいつがさらに3つ4つくっついて連隊、そいつがさらに3つ4つで師団ですんで。
30倍の兵力が必要だというの？
Sounds like it to me.
もちろんそれだけじゃ足りません。砲兵陣地に要請して山ほどの事前砲撃が必要ですわ。航空支援が得られるならファントムにナパームもばらまかせたいところですね。
冗談じゃないわ。そんな兵力ここにはないわ。じゃあそれにはるかに満たない山犬で山狩りをしたらどうなるっていうの？
まあ楽じゃないでしょうな。
Okanogi laughed boldly. He said it wouldn't be easy, but he also seemed to be implying that he was the only one capable of doing it.
連中のテリトリーでしょうが、逃げ込んだのはついさっきです。陣地もなけりゃトラップ設置の暇もないはずだ。地の利を生かすには時間が足りないはずです。
As Takano listened to Okanogi's explanation, she felt a little anxious. When she pretended to be friendly with Satoko a long time ago, she used to tell Takano all about her mountain. Takano remembered how Satoko told her about all kinds of traps she'd set up, but she couldn't recall which mountain Satoko was talking about.
茨より本部、標的の一部を発見。 R は死認できない。現在追跡中。
人質にできれば十分よ。 R がいなくても捕らえて。
ウグイス、聞こえるか？近隣の班を応援に回して退路を立て。
ウグイス了解。バックアップする。
そりゃそうだよね。退路を立ちたいよね。
Some fallen trees were leaning against a much larger pine tree, forming a natural scaffold. A small hut made out of plywood had been built on top of them. It was one of Satoko's many secret bases. It was in a perfect spot, since Mion could see the foot of the mountain well.
すごいね。みーちゃんの予想通りだね。さて、我が部にどの程度叶うか、お手並みを拝見しようか。レナたち、勝てるかな？かな？
Yes, but only if you don't make any careless mistakes.
なーに言ってんだか。向こうの指揮官は無能だね。私たちを攻めるなら山岳訓練を終了したベテラン歩兵が1個師団もいるね。それをせいぜい中隊規模でとはね。未熟にも程があるよ。さーて、何人が私たちを相手にしてこの山を無事に降りられるかな？
I'm praying that it's 0.
そったれ！ひばり4攻撃を受けた。損逃がすな。丸太を山ほど転がしてきやがった。ひばり6が捻挫で追撃不能。残りで追撃する。
Poor Skylark.
逃がすなよ。追って追って追いまくれ。休ませるんじゃねえ。
ひばり11、トラップによる攻撃を受けた。ひばり12、13が多分脳震盪だ。
Ha.
あんなの当たりどころが悪かったら死んでるぞ。ひばり60、トラップにやられた。光線が足に絡まって脱出できない。ナイフじゃ切断できない。
Where did she get steel wires, though?
番線カッターを持ってきてくれ。
Chaotic radio transmissions came in, one after another. Obviously, Okinogi had been wrong about the mountain dogs being in an advantageous position.
ウグイス戦より本部。それが井戸を偽装した落とし穴だ。隊員2名が閉じ込められて救出不能。応援を送れ。やべ。どうしたウグイス戦。応答しろウグイス戦。ウグイス戦だ。やられた。俺を後ろから突き飛ばしやがった。ウグイス9から11は井戸内。現在なれど脱出不能。くそ。本部よりウグイスバックアップが奇襲を受けた。行動が読まれているぞ。注意しろ。
ウグイス1だ。聞いていいか。どうして動きが読まれるんだ。上空に無人機の影はないぞ。
ひばり1より本部、追跡に失敗。見失った。無理だ。この山はトラップだらけだぞ。この距離を追うだけで何人負傷しちゃってんだ。
白鷺1より本部、 R を含む数名を発見した。追跡している。至急応援を送れ。
連中め、かく乱してトラップで絡め取ろってんだな。白鷺は用心しろ。向こうはお前らをトラップ地帯におびき寄せるつもりだ。敵は各個に分散し、陽動と奇襲のゲリラ戦術で抵抗してくる気だ。高度だぞ。すでに他班でトラップとアンブッシュで負傷者が多発している。用心しろ。気合い入れてかかれ、白鷺1。ん？白鷺1。
Something tells me that Huron 1 will be pretty much out of commission for a good while.
白鷺2より本部、白鷺1がトラップに。誰か班長を吊るしてるロープを切れ。残りは追撃しろ。 R を逃がすな。
ウグイス1より本部、ウグイス7たちが沈黙した。襲撃にあった可能性が否定できない。応援を送る許可を。
白崎5、隊員3名が上空から降ってきたドラム缶の直撃を受けて混沌した。何なんだここは。こんなのがまだまだあるってのか。
ヒバリ13だ。やられて倒れてたようだ。今一人発見した。追跡する。野郎、よくもやってくれやがったな。
よせ、やめろ。お前が一人でかなう相手じゃない。
大兄さん、こちらですわよ。
クソガキが待ちやがれ。
Well, how about that? We actually get to see one of these guys have a character sprite. Wasn't expecting that much production value out of any of these guys. Skylark 13 chased Satoko with an enraged snarl in his face. But Satoko ran through the woods effortlessly. Small branches scratched his body all over. But he continued to chase Satoko. Satoko ran like the wind. To her, she was simply running in her own backyard. Who'd get injured in a place like that? Never underestimate the human capacity to fuck up in your own backyard. As Skylark 13 ran after her, he passed many mountain dogs who couldn't even move because of Satoko's traps. The more of his trapped fellows he saw, the more he wasn't sure if the girl he was after was really a girl. She was just something that looked like one. You could say she is a trap. Now come on, that joke fits here, considering the situation. He reached an area where logs were stacked up in piles. It seemed like the trees in the area were being chopped down. It was a rather strange scene. On his way there, Skylark 13 saw a member from a different unit hanging upside down from a tree, and he also saw feet sticking out of a pitfall. There was a member whose foot was tied to the root of a tree with a device that looked like a pair of handcuffs. He reached this area after seeing all of them. He suddenly started sweating all over his body. For Skylark 13 realized that he had been lured into a trap. He had been caught in a snare. She had tricked him! The girl was standing in the middle of the open area, calmly balancing on a stump. She was simply looking at him. Shit, he thought. She's trying to lure me in.
ヒバリ13だ。一人を広場みたいなところで追い詰めた。捕まえてやる。捕まえてやる。
こちら、ウグイスセブン。そいつは少女じゃない。少女の姿をした悪魔だ。そいつの後を追えば地獄まで誘い込まれるぞ。
I would heed his warning if I were you.
本部よりヒバリ13。それで十分だ。応援を待て。今そこに最寄りの隊員を向かわせている。
どうなさいましたの？私を捕まえたければ、あともう10メートルくらいは歩く必要がございますわよ。
It was only 10 meters. If he walked about 10 meters, he would catch that bratty little girl. How many steps did he have to take to walk 10 meters? If he took 10 steps to walk 10 meters, that meant there would be 10 more chances of stepping on a trap. But it was only 10 steps. He can catch her after taking just 10 steps. You stupid fool.
そう思いなら、まずは最初の一歩を踏み出してみればいいではございませんが。ほらほら。くそー。
How is he going to take his first step? That area with weeds looks suspicious. Oh wait, are you trying to psych him out? But the bare ground looks suspicious too. What if he jumped onto a tree stump? No. That was what she wanted him to do. Cold sweat was dripping off of Skylark 13's body. He only needed to take 10 steps. So why was he so nervous about taking the first one?
ヒバリ13。切り株だ。遅
せひばり13。さっき根っこで足を縛られてたウグイス8だ。切り株はきっと罠だ。辺りは切り株だらけというのがうさんくさい。聞こえるかひばり13。ブッシュは危険だ。草むらは踏むな。むき出しの土もやばい。
I think it's very likely that she doesn't have any traps set between herself and this guy right now, and she's trying to psych him out. But it is also possible that she does, so if I were you, buddy, I'd just let this one go. Do you want me to fly? Oh yes, that'd be impressive.
私退屈ですからそろそろ失礼しますわよ。
こちらスマキにされて転がっているウグイス9だ。今標的の一人にそう頭を蹴られている。
Oh, Rika is having a good time right now, I'm sure.
そこはトラップフィールドだと言ってるぞ。その待ち構えてる小娘の最高傑作が設置されているらしい。
Feeding them false information now?
油断するな。
You've got to be kidding me. Did he say magnum opus? What does he mean by magnum opus? Then what about all the other traps? Weren't they her magnum opus? We mountain dogs are professionals. We're prepared to engage in battle. Yet this girl is playing us like fools. Can we not beat her? Can't we beat that brat? This must be a bluff. How is it possible for a trap to exist that's worse than what I've seen so far? It's a bluff. That must be a bluff. Now I'm definitely going to get her. Should I start with my right foot or my left? Does it really matter? The girl suddenly lifted her hand and thrust it at me. Is she trying to tell me to stop?
何事もなく5歩を無事に歩けたらあなたの勝利ということでいいですわよ。
ほほう、それは大した自信じゃねえか。もし俺が5歩何もなく歩けたらどうするつもりだ。
そうですわね。私の敗北を認めて降参して差し上げてもよろしくってよ。私今日は最高にトラップ脳が絶好調ですの。あなたを5歩で絡め取ってご覧に入れますわ。
クソガキ！
落ち着けひばり13。挑発に乗るな。そいつは悪魔だ。外見に騙されるな。そいつは人の心を読むぞ。本部よりひばり13。深追いするな。十分だ。近くまでウグイスが応援に来ている。その場で耐えろ。
それじゃ俺の負けってことじゃねえかよ。こうだとこうだとくそ乗ってやるぜ。5歩だな。たったの5歩だな。
Ah, you stupid fool.
男が何度もくどいですわね。愛のささやき以外は男は一言で十分ですのよ。
このガキャー！
ひばり13！読まれるぞ。劇場は思考を読まれるぞ。
I'd argue she's not reading his mind, more so like writing in it and writing instructions in it for him to follow.
そうさ、俺はひばりの13番。ミントみたいにクールなのが透明さ。
I have no idea what Golgo is, but I'm sure it must be impressive.
だから熱くならずによく考えろ。そうさ、俺の思考はすでに絡め取られていた。奴に向かって5歩進まなければならないって時点で思考を絡め取られてたぜ。
ほほう、それはどういう意味でございますの？
This is what it means.
前じゃねえ。後ろに5歩歩くんだよ。
did it! I did it! I was certain it was a trick. If I take 5 steps, I win. She didn't say I had to move forward. No, she didn't. I can go backwards too.
だからあなたは5歩でおしまいなんですのよ。
Oh, hello.
Hibari 13 沈黙。
Well, we hardly knew you, Mr. 13. But I will say, you've probably gone down in arguably the most animated fashion I've seen in the whole thing so far.
あのバカ、すっかり乗せられやがって。
Satoko's remarkable performance wasn't just her own effort alone. Mion had mastered the geography and the enemies' formations while instructing Satoko. Satoko marked all of her traps on the map. When that map and Mion's ability to command combined, the club was simply unbeatable. Rika and Hanyu, who knew about the mountain almost as well as Satoko, relayed orders from Mion to Keiichi or Reina. They then prepared for the ambush. The traps didn't always activate when they were stepped on. Sometimes, Keiichi and the others were setting them off at the right moment. Keiichi and Reina continued to fight everywhere, according to Mion's orders. Sometimes they'd hide, and sometimes they'd attack. One by one, they eliminated their enemies. Satoko's traps had been taking down most of the enemies, but Keiichi's surprise attacks with his bat had worked out successfully too. Not even the well-trained mountain dogs could respond to attacks after being stunned by these traps. Humans need a little time to react. According to the research done by the US Armed Forces, the average reaction time is 15 seconds. In other words, any soldier is powerless during the 15 seconds following a surprise attack. Shortening those 15 seconds is one goal of their training. But no matter how much they train, it will never become 0. The radio communications had actually made things much worse for them. The more they heard about damage done to the other units, the more worried they got. That slowed them down. It made them think less strategically. Psychological warfare at its finest. At that point, as far as Mion was concerned, the mountain dogs were no longer a force to be reckoned with.
ケイイチは大成功しましたです。仲良くスマキにしてリパーなのです。はあ、サトコの方もうまくいったようなのです。みんなやっつけてしまいましたです。
了解。確認するけど、この攻撃での戦果は5だね。どうするよ敵さん。南部方面軍はこれで戦力の3割は脱落だよ。負傷者の対応に通常1人から2人。ってことは手の空いた兵士はほとんどいないってわけだ。まっとうな指揮官なら本部に撤退を申し入れるね。
こちらひばり湾、隊員に負傷者多数。負傷者への対応で追撃に手が回らない。これ以上の追撃は断念せざるを得ない。
ひばり湾、損害は大きいが我が方は確実に敵の行動権を狭めているぞ。撤退は認めない。現状兵力で戦線を維持せよ。
くそー、ひばり湾より全員本部から死ねと命令だ。
Yep.
装備を再点検しろ。進軍を再開するぞ。
At least try to die with some dignity.
でも高野さんたちは頭に血が上ってるからそれを許可しない。指揮官は撤退を却下され、士気が低下したまま追撃を再開。こいつは叩く絶好のチャンスだね。リカちゃん、レナと合流して Z 地区に誘い込んで。あそこのトラップはだいぶごっついよ。羽生はケイちゃんに X 地区に転戦しろと連絡を。 こんな面白いゲームはないね。
ミオンが絶好調なのです。今のミーが生まれる時代を間違えていたら歴史に名を残しかねないのです。
Well, probably yes. Let's be real here. She is crafty, when she definitely so.
私に言わしゃ、ネルソンも東郷もまあまあってとこだね。もう裏山全体が手に取るようだよ。
Mion was the type to display emotional? How did I get that? Exponential ability. When she's down, she's at rock bottom. But when she's in perfect form, it's just terrifying. That was the blood of the head of one of the three families of Hinamizawa. If Mion had been around for a historic battle, she would have changed history. If she were to join Napoleon, Siberia would be French territory. If she were to join Hitler, Europe would belong to the Third Reich. And even for all that, the battle in the mountains was simply a diversion. Just as Mion had expected, everything had collapsed into chaos. The mountain dogs could think calmly. They could have realized that they hadn't seen any adults. But they didn't notice, confused as they were by all the attacks they were suffering. Of course, that too was part of Mion's plan. The scale of the diversion would hide the fact that there was a rescue unit going to get Tomitaki. Therefore, the more chaotic the battle grew on the mountain, the better it was for the rescue unit. That was why she chose such an ostentatious method of fighting. But at the same time, that was exactly the kind of fight Mion had preferred. She didn't intend to let it be just a diversion. She was planning to destroy the dogs' main force on these mountains. Yet, most frightening of all was our home advantage. It wasn't exaggerating to say the theory that defenders have thrice the advantage over assailants is heavily due to their advantage of location. In that case, how's the rescue unit doing? Were they at a disadvantage because they were on the offense? Let's find out. The 4 rescue unit members, led by Irie, were hiding in a bush next to the clinic. I hope you all got cardboard boxes that you all can hide and move around under.
こちら側をフォローするカメラは故障中ですから大丈夫です。
こんなとこから堂々と？うわ、怖いね。
敵は監視をセキュリティに依存しきってるようです。問題ないでしょう。
行きましょう。まずは壁沿いに伝い、所長室の裏へ。
はい。私が出るとき、窓は閉めませんでしたから。そこから入ると、すぐ脇が裏口で、そこには監視カメラと1階保安室があり、死角角前は厳重に監視カメラで見張られていますので、必ずバレるでしょう。
地下に行く前にその1階の2人を制圧しないとね。退路確保は基本でしょ。
まずは所長室から入って1階保安室。
They moved forward, walking against the wall so they'd remained in the blind spot of the security cameras. They soon reached the window of the director's office. If any village kids saw them, they'd assume they were playing around, pretending to be spies. Irie was glad that the clinic was closed on Sundays. Irie peeked into the room. It was exactly the same as how he left it. The window was open too. The 4 of them snuck into the room through that window. Akasaka put his ear against the door to the hallway. Then he signaled the others to let them know that there was nobody on the other side. Since the clinic was closed, the mountain dogs were the only people around. It being Sunday really was fortunate. It was very quiet in the clinic. The chorus of the cicadas were the only cicadas that could be heard. There was a clock on the director's desk. It was almost 11:30 a.m. Shion was surprised to find herself getting hungry, given all that was going on. Well, you can always devour the flesh of your enemies, demon style. Kasai and Akasaka checked over their weapons. Irie brought out a book of blueprints from a locked bookcase. The tile said construction plan for the Irie clinic.
ここが所長室です。ここが1階保安室。出てすぐそこです。監視カメラはこの赤鉛筆がそうです。
1階保安室の制圧自体は難しくなさそうだ。問題は地下ですね。
これが地下の研究区画です。ここが入り口。図面では表向きは職員用の2階への階段になっていますが、実際は地下区画への入り口が隠されています。そして階段で地下へ。
よくもこんな大きな地下を作ったものです。地上部分よりもよっぽど広いですね。
それは地下こそがこの診療所の真の姿である証拠です。
で、これが監督の認証カードでないと入れない扉と。認証カードが封印されて使えなくなってるなんてことは、万一認証カードが使えない場合にゲートの物理的突破は可能？
非常に厳重な扉で、証拠隠滅時にはそれを閉じてから内部に注水して封鎖する決まりになっています。
ということは秘密扉か。この溶石を満たす水圧に耐えるということは相当に頑丈だ。
ってことは認証カード以外の方法では不可能ってことだね。
Sure looks that way. Unless you're all small enough to fit in some
一
air
般用の認
vents.
証カードは個別の登録抹消が可能なはずですが、私と高野さんの認証カードは商工用の特別カードと聞いています。登録抹消には各個に設定した8桁のパスワードが必要ですから、事実上彼らには抹消できません。
将校自らが不法使用することは想定していないということですね。
それでもダメな時は1階保安室の人間に開けさせましょう。保安要員のカードなら将校の次に強力なはずです。
素直に協力してくれるとは思えませんが。
Well, their consent isn't really required.
協力しないんならカードと指紋認証用に指を1本ちょっと拝借するまでです。
True, and we are in a medical clinic, so I'm sure there's plenty of sharp instruments that we can use.
そうしたくはないですね。
I'd rather not do that either, but desperate times.
私のカードで開くことを祈るばかりです。
地下のセキュリティルームはどれです？
認証カードで入ってすぐこの部屋には空調もテレビもありますから、基本的に保安の方はそこに全て詰めています。上で2人をやっつければ残りの6人がいるはずです。
6人か。一気に制圧しないと難しいね。一瞬で制圧しないとほぼ確実に警報を鳴らされる。先に警報を切断する方法は？
ちょっと分かりませんが、予備電源や予備回線があるはずです。
現実的じゃないか。セキュリティルームを制圧する方が現実的ですね。保安の連中の武装は
？1階の保安は非武装ですが、1階保安室には一応銃が置かれているという話です。地下の保安は全員が拳銃を携帯しています。あとセキュリティルームにはもっと強力な連発式の銃が何丁か置かれていたはずです。
屋内での用途から考えて多分口径の短い機関拳銃のようなものでしょう。長距離での命中率はひどく落ちますが、小回りが利き近距離では十分な火力を持つ危険なものです。
地下で撃ってきた連中 MP5 でしたし、そいつが何丁持ってのはちょいと厄介ですね。でもここを制圧できれば地下は私たちの手に落ちる。監督、サトシ君は？
本当は動かしたくないところですが、 敵の巣の中に放置はできません。サトシ君も安全なところに移しましょう。私の付き添いも必要です。
サトシ君はどの部屋にいるんです？
この奥の病室に監禁されています。そこは去年から彼専用の部屋になっています。
サトシ君。
I know you really want to see him, Shion, but just stick to whatever. Just stick to the plan, and just save seeing him until after you get the whole freaking clinic under your control, or even better, until the whole situation with Takano is resolved. If you can afford to wait a little bit more, because you know, focusing on taking out the enemy should be priority number 1 here. The look in Shion's eyes made clear her determination. The security guards who chased after Irie were in the security room on the first floor. They had resumed their game of poker. They knew that the mountain dogs were combing through the mountains, and they were well aware that the Institute would continue to be in danger. But their job was to stay in that room. And besides, they were working hard on their poker game. Better for me that they do that. Of course, they weren't really concentrating on the game itself. They were both still chatting about the recent car chase, and both seemed proud about what they had done. I shot out that bastard's tires real good. They were ordered to shoot at the tires, but they wished they had been ordered to shoot at Irie himself. They definitely would have caught him then. They talked and laughed like that. When people stopped being on edge, that left them all the more vulnerable. This was a perfect example. That was why it took only 2 seconds to suppress them. The security guards were professionals. They immediately realized the guns that Kasai, Akasaka, and Shion were holding weren't toys. They already heard there was a gunfight in the basement of the Sonozaki residence. The security guards knew they weren't dealing with amateurs. They also knew they wouldn't hesitate to fire. That was why they surrendered so quickly. That was easy. They had handcuffs on them already, so it was easy for Kasai and the others to restrain them. Security guards had never thought they'd be wearing the cuffs themselves. Irony! They had especially never dreamed of being locked up in a toilet. Again, irony. Their hands were cuffed to pipes behind them as they sat on the toilet seats. Their mouths were stuffed with hand towels, then covered with duct tape. Shion, clearly amused, remarked how she always wanted to do this to someone. Kasai couldn't help but laugh.
ここまでは順調ですね。問題は地下です。監視カメラで必ず気づかれます。
そのカメラはモノクロ？画面は4分割？
確かそうだったと思います。よくある防犯カメラの画面です。
Gonna take advantage of a certain weakness of theirs, I assume?
ってことは解像度は良くないですね。なら私いい手を思いつきました。
Go on.
シオンさん、捕虜の虐待はあまり良くないのでは？
Oh, wait a minute. Are you talking about stealing their uniforms? The mountain dogs weren't only locked in the bathroom, but had to go through extra humiliation. Radio calls continued to come in from the mountain dogs, who were fighting up in the mountains. The security guards listened to them intently over the speakers. From what they could hear, it was obvious the mountain dogs weren't doing well at all. They kept falling into traps, suffering heavy losses, all of which they had never expected. It was clear that the mountain dogs were trapped, but they even started to think that they were being lured into something bigger than a simple military maneuver. The mountain dogs had made a mistake. They assumed the club members went to the mountains to escape from Hinamizawa, but they were wrong. They were simply being lured into their enemy's carefully prepared territory. The panicked voices of the mountain dogs, Takano's yelling, and Okanogi's reprimands could be heard through the speaker. It certainly sounded like a war zone.
大鳥湾より大鳥。休憩時間は終わりだぞ。俺たちも出撃する。壊滅した白鷺のポジションを埋めるんだ。味方の損害率はすでに致命的状況だが、敵は確実に後退を重ねてすでに包囲されつつある。もう一息だ。温存した大鳥で一気に圧殺する。陣頭指揮はサンサが直接取られるそうだ。俺も出るぞ。これで決着させる。
おい、隊長が出るぞ。大鳥も上がる。総力戦だ。
なんて奴らだ。ってことはすでに被害は小隊規模にもなるってのか。
俺たちは何者を相手にしてるんだよ。相手はどこの特殊部隊だってんだ。
More special than you ever will hope to be. The security guards listening to the battle reports over the radio fluctuated between dismay and rejoicing. A cute chime rang suddenly. It was a warning chime that rang automatically when someone went through the entrance to the basement. When the chime rang, the guards were supposed to check the screen to see who was coming through. The one who nodded at the screen needed a moment to comprehend what he was seeing.
おい、入江所長だぞ。
何?
They could see the two security guards on the first floor restraining Irie and some girl.
これ所長だよな。どういうことだ。
そういうことか。
I see.
わかったぜ。
So Kasai and Akasaka must be wearing the uniforms. They're trying to get them to open the door for us.
向こうは陽動で、こいつらが富武救出に忍び込もうとしたってことだ。
三佐に所長を連行したと連絡しろ。
A buzzer sounded and a computer panel displayed information about the card being used to enter. Commission Officer Pass. ID 0001, Special Grade 1. Lieutenant Colonel Kyusuke Irie, Director. Password. Match. Fingerprint confirmation. Match.
Huh?
How strange. Security guards brought Irie down. That made sense. But why were they using the director's security access card? They were even using his fingerprint. Why were they having him do that? Wouldn't it be quicker for the guards to do that themselves? One of the guards figured it out, but it was too late. The door to the basement was open, and the four newcomers forced their way inside. Hello, plebs! They ran through the security camera screen, and were headed straight for the security room. They had them! As soon as this door opened, the security guards started firing. Akasaka realized that if it had taken him a second longer to pull back, he would have been riddled with hundreds of bullets. One of the guards pushed the desk onto its side. The paper cups on the desk fell to the floor, spilling coffee everywhere. They used the desk as a barricade. The other two guards started to shoot at random. As long as the guards were shooting at the rescue unit, they couldn't counterattack. One of the guards activated the emergency alarm, and another picked up the submachine gun off the wall. The other one picked up a gas mask. It was impressive that they got their act together so quickly. No kidding. A situation like this would result in a fierce gun battle, meaning that it would take quite a while for the rescue team to suppress the guards. The emergency alarm sounding in the basement reminded them that their surprise attack had failed.
一気に制圧し損ねた。
でも敵は全員この中、袋のこの部屋に釘付けにしているうちにサトシ君と富武さんを救出しちゃいましょう。
The mountain dogs outside would definitely hear that alarm. If they took long enough, the enemy would come to block their escape route. Then they'd be trapped inside.
そうだ。確かセキュリティに侵入者対策で確か
Yuri started to speak while he tried to recollect it. Shion told him that he should have remembered something like that before they came in. Yeah, no shit. Before Yuri remembered, a voice came on over the speakers. Takano?
エントランス区画にて緊急事態が発生しました。
No, it's probably a pre-recorded one.
エントランス区画にて緊急事態が発生しました。問題が解決するまで研究施設内の全区画は緊急閉鎖されます。エントランス区画のスタッフはセキュリティルームに集合し、保安隊員の指示に従ってください。120秒後に研究区画及びエントランス区画には鎮圧用ガスの自動散布が行われます。
Yeah, I guess this really does explain the gas masks.
繰り返します。
どうやら2分以内に制圧して警報を解除しないとやばいことになりそうだな。
Basically, yes.
鎮圧用ガスって何ですか？毒ガス？
I think it's I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that. If you inhale a lot of it, it's dangerous, but not deadly. It only takes a few seconds to take effect. There are many symptoms, but most common ones is sneeze for about 30 minutes. That sounds like a bitch. Isn't that also called Red Agent? Now that's a name I remember hearing somewhere. The military used it to secure enemy territories. They either had to run out of there immediately or take over the security room, but since the area had been sealed off, they couldn't escape. But there were armed guards in the security room, and if the rescue unit members even peeked around the corner, they'd be shot at mercilessly.
ダメだ。これでは狙って撃つなんて到底できない。
インドアの基本はグレネードか。くそ、そんなのないって。
Should have brought some grenades.
飛び込めば蜂の巣です。どうすればいいんだ？
サトシ君は目前だというのに悔しい。
Shion pressed her forehead against her gun, gritting her teeth in frustration. As Kasaya analyzed the situation, he stood up and spoke.
皆さん、私に任せてもらいましょう。
Don't you dare pull a heroic sacrifice on us. The guards in the security room were on edge too. Once the gas was flowing, everything would come to an end. But the guards knew their enemy wouldn't just sit and wait for that to happen. They'd come rushing in, regardless of the counterattack they'd face. Although the guards would still have the upper hand, it'd be a point-blank gunfight. They wouldn't come out of it unscathed. Therefore, as the deadline approached, their tension increased. The guards never even considered that the door they opened would be shut again. They fired at the door, leaving many small holes in it. After that, it all went quiet. What were they thinking? There was nowhere to hide. The gas was about to be released. Why did they close the door? For what reason did they do that? That was when a loud explosion punched a hole in the door the size of a fist. Not only the door, but the wall in the security room has a similar hole. Shotgun! I call shotgun! A calm voice echoed from the other side of the door.
ご名答です。こいつは人間を撃つ弾じゃありません。威力は 皆さんほどならすでにご存知でしょう。
The power of a slug bullet is limited to extremely close-range battles, but is also incredibly powerful. After all, it's fired from a shotgun, but it doesn't scatter. A shotgun is meant to fire scatter shots, but it can be used to fire only one huge, incredibly powerful bullet. That's the slug. It's usually used for hunting. It's used to shoot at animals, not humans. If it was used to be used on a human, their arms and legs would be shattered, and nothing would be left of the head. It shouldn't even be called a bullet. It should be called a cannon. It would easily pierce through the door, the desk they were using as a barricade, and any guards hiding behind the desk before slamming into the wall. The guards understood very well just how powerful it was. The kind of guns they shot out many small bullets. Therefore, they didn't work as well through a door. But their enemies didn't care about the door at all. Their weapon could easily pierce through anything. Hiding behind a desk didn't mean a thing.
あなた方を粉々にできることがご理解できたはずです。死にたくなかったら警報を切っていただきましょう。
落ち着け。もうじきガスが出る。それまでの辛抱だ。
その前に皆さんが内臓をぶちまけることになるとはお考えが至りませんか。
Kasai's voice was extremely intimidating. Only one who truly understood the power of the shotgun could talk that way.
時間がありません。5秒でケツを取ります。5つ数えて警報が切れなければ覚悟していただきます。
どうする？ガスまでまだ60秒くらいあるぞ。
1.
焦るな。向こうだってビビってるんだ。飲まれるんじゃねえ。
2. That was when a deep voice rang out, reverberating through the pit of their stomachs.
おい、人が親切に話してるのに聞いてねえのか。
3. It must have been coming from the same person, but it changed so much so quickly.
この笠井達義がてめえありがてえとは思わねえのか、ガキどもが。お前ら俺を舐めてんのか。ああ返事せんか、ガキどもが。
A roar and an explosion sounded at the same time. The upper half of the door disappeared. Numerous lead balls bounced around in the room, breaking the lights and ricocheting off the walls. Shattered glass fell onto the floor. The shotgun had turned the security room into hell. The hurricane of lead bullets blew violently through the room as it shattered, scattered, and destroyed everything. The guards could only cover their heads and pray. They prayed the lead balls wouldn't hit them, and endured the falling glass. Before they had a chance to recover, Kasai jumped in through what was left of the door and kicked the desk aside. He stepped onto one guard's head and yelled at the others, "Go, Kasai!"
最初にミンチになりてえのは誰だ。てめえかこら。さっき上等決めやがったのはてめえかこら。
違う。降伏する。撃つな。
何いつまでちゃかひけらかしてんだこら。殺されてえか煽りさい。てめえとは築いてきた屍の山の高さが違うんじゃボケ。
すんません。勘弁してください。
They dropped their guns voluntarily and got on the floor with their hands on their heads. Even Shion couldn't believe what just happened. There were several of them, and all had been amply armed. Kasai had a weapon too, but it was his presence that defeated them. Even the mountain dogs couldn't equal what Kasai had to go through.
何てめえら昼で始めてんだこら。マスク剥がされてとっとと警報を止めろクソガキ。撃つな。
One of the guards got up in a hurry and switched the alarm off. Kasai stood there calmly, but they were only seconds away from the gas releasing. Shion and Akasaka came to their senses and quickly moved into the room to help Kasai subdue the guards.
Kasai, あんた。
こんな真似は二度としないつもりでしたが、緊急措置でした。忘れてください。
That was the Kasai Shion knew. But in the end, Kasai hadn't killed anyone. Shion remembered Kasai telling her how terrifying shotguns were in the basement of the Sonozaki residence. That was Shotgun Tatsu, whom all the people in the Shishiboni were so afraid of.
急ぎましょう。どの道すでに警報は鳴らされて長居はできません。
そうですね。急ぎましょう。
Akasaka and Kasai pulled out the guards' handcuffs and restrained them.
Satoshi-kun, どこ?
Now that the security room was under their control, Shion realized there was nothing keeping her from seeing Satoshi. She was getting anxious. Irie had shown her the map. He must be down there, she thought. Shion already started to run.
私も行ってきます。サトシ君と富武さんを助けないと。
You guys really shouldn't go down there, for the love of God. Think for a second. What if there's a trap?
すみません。頼みます。
1、2、3、4、5。
Akasaka felt a chill running down his spine. Irie said there were 6 security guards. Well, there you go. Where's number 6? Shion wasn't paying attention to anything else. She was only thinking about her reunion with Satoshi. And she still can't hear in her left ear. To make things worse, the security guard is waiting on the left side of Shion. Shion had to regret letting her guard down just a bit too early. The mountain dog jumped out and grabbed Shion. He choked her neck with his thick arm. There was no way Shion could get out of this situation alone. Irie saw what had happened. Fortunately, their backs were turned towards him. Here was Irie's chance to attack the enemy. Do it, Doc! But today, Irie had lost a lot of confidence in himself. Now's not the time for self-doubt! He felt he hadn't done anything right all day. Fighting wasn't his expertise, so there really wasn't anything he could have done. But he was disappointed in himself for not being able to help just the same. But in that moment, he was the only one who could do anything. If possible, he wanted to go get Kasai or Akasaka. They were both very reliable. They could take out this man in an instant. But there was no time for that. Only in this moment was his back facing Irie. And if Irie didn't do anything, the dog was sure to take Shion hostage, creating a deadlock. An enemy backup could arrive at any moment, so being in a deadlock would mean death. Therefore, Irie couldn't depend on anyone else. He had to resolve the situation himself. We've already been over this, just do it! He only had one chance. Once the unit member turned around, the deadlock would begin. But there wasn't even a way for Irie to knock him down in one shot. No, he had to. He must. There had to be something only Irie could do. Poke him in the eyes! Irie took a mechanical pencil out of his pocket. It was probably the strongest weapon he had.
くそ、やってくれますね、所長。
I hope that hurts, bitch. Irie stabbed the man's neck with his mechanical pencil, but only scratched him a little. What was he thinking? The man drew his gun, pressed it to Shion's head, and created a stalemate. just as Irie predicted.
ごめんなさい。私、サトシ君のことで頭がいっぱいだった。
Apologize to us after we rescue you. Shion's eyes were filled with tears.
さて所長、月並みで恐縮ですが、他の侵入者ともども武装解除してもらいましょう。さっきのとんでもない音は相当でかい銃を持ち込んでますね。撃たれたらたまりませんので。
Come to think of it. Come on, Irie. Remember what Kasai said from earlier. You can do it.
笑わせます。この入江機関のこの入江京介に取引などできるつもりですか。
何？
これは高野さんが開発したシャーペン型の偽装注射器です。
Oh yes, bluff your way through to victory, man.
薬物については説明が必要ですか。
なんだと？
If a regular person had said that, it wouldn't have worked. But Irie was wearing his white coat. The basement was his territory. What he just said sounded very believable. He wanted to believe that Irie was lying, but he started to feel an itch on the back of his neck.
H178 は高野さんが生み出した170番台の最高傑作です。いかなる治療手段もわずか数分で錯覚、妄想、頭痛、鼻水、鼻づまり、お通じの普通、数々の激症を引き起こし、最後には自らの爪でお尻をかき破って死んでしまいます。
What a horrible way to go. Scratching your butt to where you bleed to death.
治療法はただ一つ。1分以内にこの解毒剤の注射を受けることのみです。
嘘だ。そんなのあるはずね。
すでに30秒経過です。そろそろ心臓を経由して全身に回り始めてくるからです。全身のリンパ腺にかゆみは出ませんか。寝るときにいびきやおならが出ませんか。
What does that last bit have to do with anything? And also, doesn't everyone? Shion can only watch this pathetic act in silence. But for the mountain dog, who worked at such a shady research center, what Irie said sounded totally believable.
わかった。降参する。早くその治療薬を打ってくれ。
はて、言葉遣いがなっていませんね。
わかりました。降参、早く注射をしてください。
Good boy.
ダメですね。
But not good enough, apparently.
ご主人様への言葉遣いがなっていません。一度だけ指導しましょう。いいですか。この注射はお尻に注射しなくてはなりません。まず四つん這いになってズボンをずらし、お尻を出します。その際お尻は突き出すようにし、両肩はぺったり床につけるようにします。
Why would you subject us to this, man?
右手の親指の爪を噛みながら振り返り、そうそうそしてあなたはご主人様、この私めにお注射をくださいませと哀願するのです。言えませんか。嘆かわしい。そもそも古来メイドはご主人様への絶対忠誠を誓い、熱死暴行によって美徳と文化を築き上げてきたのです。そんな素晴らしい社会を作った近年の日本はどうですか。メイドの心を忘れた若者はガングロ、フーズソックス、派手派手なハワイ装束。ああ、大和なでしこが情けない。
Am I the only one who doesn't really mind tan skin in general? I mean, to me it looks just fine.
お肌をスレスレにお手入れして過剰な日焼けには要注意。ソックスはもちろんニーソですが、黒のストッキングも素晴らしい。いや、でもたまにはハイソックスも素敵です。そして培われるメイドの心。 思えば日本はわびさびとメイドを忘れました。その結果がこの低出産率、超高齢化社会。今や熟年人口は増え続け、萌えメディアもその層をターゲットにするのは時間の問題。
Isn't this rant, hasn't this little tirade of yours that you just gone on surpassed 1 minute by now?
やがてはストライクゾーン春が真上とされてきたおばさんにもスポットライトが浴びせられ、いつしかそれが主流にすらなってゆく。おばさんとメイドの組み合わせはまさにトイレ用洗剤、混ぜるな危険。それを混ぜるとなぜかメイドでなく家政婦さんになり、急にトレンディードラマから昼ドラっぽくなっちゃうのです。それはつまりメイドの絶滅。その時月は砕け、悲しみの雨を地上に降らし、地球をアステロイドベルトが覆う。それこそが予言書に記された最後の審判の日。
I don't think anybody would agree with you on that. But it is hilarious to think about. I'll give you that. I want to remind everybody that this is the guy right here who was once a professional in messing around with people's brains. This guy right here. Let that sink in. This is something else. Yes, please. As entertaining as this lecture is, we got bigger things to worry about. There really was nobody left to stop her. Shion ran down the hallway at full speed. It was right there. There was a huge window in front of Shion that allowed her to look inside. Shion threw herself at the window. Satoshi was there, lying on the bed. He was sleeping with an IV connected to his arm. There were some wires attached to his forehead and chest to observe his brain waves. The waves of light displayed on the machine they connected to proved that he was at least still alive. But he might be sleeping very deeply. His face was pale, and he looked like there was barely any life left in him.
生きてるんだよね。サトシ君、生きてるんだよね。
落ち着いてください。入江先生、早く彼を。
Irie brought in a stretcher to load Satoshi onto. Kasai opened it up.
早くサトシ君を、サトシ君
を。シオンさん、彼を出す前に一つだけどうしても約束してほしいことがあります。
Irie gave Shion a condition. What is he saying now? Shion angrily thought.
今から彼を担架に移しますが、決して起こそうとしてはいけません。いいですね。絶対約束してください。
どうして？
Probably because he's still in the terminal stage, and if you wake him up, well... Yeah. Right? Am I right? That was the first thing Shion wanted to do. She wanted to tell him personally that he was free. But Irie was telling her that she couldn't do that.
辛いことですが、真実だけを手短に話します。サトシ君はあの日、末期発症により脳と心に深刻なダメージを受けました。 幸いなことに命に異常はありませんが、サトシ君には目に入るものの敵味方、真実と虚構の区別がつかないのです。過度の被害妄想と恐怖に取りつかれ、それから逃れるために急祖が猫を噛むように目の前にいるのが誰であろうと襲いかかります。昨年不用心なスタッフが整形手術を必要とするほどの大怪我をしました。彼はたとえあなたであっても例外としません。
Shion finally noticed it. While Satoshi was covered in a blanket on the bed, there were 2 belts over that blanket, holding him down on the bed, and that he also had leather straps around his arms. He was restrained to the bed. The belts had some marks on them.
そんな、それって治るんですか？
The silence that followed was cruel. Irie wanted to tell her that he would be cured, but he was a doctor. He knew he shouldn't say anything irresponsible, and so that was why he couldn't say anything.
何それ？何それ？じゃあ何？サトシ君はもうって言ってくれないの？
He's not saying anything like that.
私の頭を撫でてくれないの？なんで？なんで？
Shion cried as she pounded on the glass.
いけません。彼のことを本当に大切に思うならどうか彼を起こさないでください。それはきっと彼が望むことでもあるのです。起こせばそのサトシ君の姿はあなたを必ず傷つけます。そしてサトシ君もその姿をあなたに見せたいとは思わないはずです。ですから分かってください。
そんな。
Shion slid down the window and hit the floor, crying uncontrollably. She scratched at the floor. The sad reunion in her anger made her claw at the tiles. If Satoshi's smile was there under the floor, Shion would scratch until all of her nails were gone. But Satoshi wasn't under the floor. He was right there. He was sleeping on the bed, and he wasn't supposed to be woken up.
ですが、決して悪い話だけではないのです。微弱ですが、この1年、脳波の傾向に回復の兆しが見られるんです。人間の体は弱くありません。それは脳も同じです。脳に致命的損傷を負った人が奇跡的に回復を遂げたという報告は世界中にあります。サトシ君は帰ってこようとしています。必死に戦っています。そして私も負けない。帰ろうと戦うサトシ君をこちら側に連れ戻そうと私は今後もそして必ずサトシ君をひなみ沢に連れて帰ってみせます。
The brain is what moves people, but the brain is only a part of the body. If something happens to the brain, the person will end up changing. That change hurts the person himself, as well as the people around him. And hurting others hurts that person even more. Irie recalled his parents, the abnormal change in his father. His mother was not able to understand that was caused by a brain disorder. That was enough. That was sad enough. That's the reason why Irie became a neurologist. Right now, there was a young boy before him, and a young girl. Before him was a fragment of the sadness from that day. A fragment of that day's regret. After his father's death, Irie learned that he was misunderstood, and that was due to a brain disorder. But it was all too late by then. He regretted not getting into the study of brains 5 years earlier, but it was too late. But now he had studied and experienced so much. He achieved things and he had confidence. But he still had regrets about that day. Irie holds his fist tightly and spoke without hiding his tears.
絶対です。命を懸けてもいい。私は絶対にサトシ君をひなみ沢へ連れ帰ります。この入江京介が絶対というのです。そしてサトシ君も帰ってこようとしている。互いが手を伸ばし合って届かぬわけがない。だからシオンさん、私を信じてその日まで待ってください。絶対この入江京介が彼を連れ帰ります。
Irie vowed this from the bottom of his heart, and he realized something. Irie realized that everything he had done was in preparation for this day. The two people in front of him weren't his parents, but he was going to rid himself of his regrets and devote himself to that promise.
本当ですね。サトシ君、帰ってくるんですね。本当に。
絶対です。私の人生のすべてを捧げてでも彼をひなみ沢へ連れ帰ります。だからシオンさん、その日を信じて私と待ちましょう。そしてきっと私たちで彼を迎えてあげましょう。その日まで待てますか？この悲しい事実をさとこちゃんに内緒にできますか？
はい。サトシ君、帰ってくるなら何でもします。何でも我慢します。
あれを見てください。
The bear! There was something in the corner of that dark room. It was the giant teddy bear that Satoshi had bought that day.
彼がさとこちゃんの誕生日のために一生懸命に働いて貯めたお金で買ったものです。あれをサトシ君がさとこちゃんに渡さないでこの世を去るなんて考えられますか？考えられないでしょう。サトシ君は必ずあのぬいぐるみと一緒にあなたとさとこちゃんのところへ帰ってきます。どうかその日まで我慢をしてください。
お見舞いに来てもいいですか？
もちろんです。
彼の脇に座ったり本を読んであげたりしてもいいですか？それから
いいですよ。きっと彼も喜ぶでしょう。
Shion started to cry again. Akasaka came with Tomitaki, but he couldn't say anything to her. Oh my shit, you got a Tomitaki! Nice! Give me a second to register that.
あなたに番犬を呼んでもらえれば全ては解決できます。
実はそうもいかないのです。さっきの保安室の銃撃戦で無線装置が壊れたようなのです。山犬は非常時対応で村全体の通信手段を遮断しているでしょうから、ここの無線装置が損傷した以上、東京へ連絡をするには村を脱出するほかないんです。
となれば車で強行突破するしかないでしょう。 ミオンさんたちもよく時間を稼いでくれています。しかし籠城ですからやがては追い詰められるでしょう。一刻も早く富武さんを村の外へ脱出させ番犬を呼び寄せる必要があります。
困った問題が一つ。彼らが非常時対応で電話線を遮断しているなら、同じ対応で町へ通じる街道を封鎖することになっているのです。車両突破を防ぐため、彼らには歩兵が携帯する対戦車榴弾砲が一つ与えられているはずです。
RPG7 ですか。戦車を想定していないでしょうから弾頭は榴弾でしょうが、直撃しなくても車がひっくり返るかもしれません。相当厄介な相手です。
But neither are we to them.
街道を車で突破しなかったら無駄な時間がかかりすぎる。迂回などしていたら日が暮れます。みんなもよく戦ってくれていると思うが、暮れるまで持ちこたえられるとは思えません。急がないと危険です。
もたもたしてる暇はないです。何が何でも富武のおじさまを沖宮に大至急。監督はサトシ君と安全な場所へ。とにかく大至急出ましょう。ここに敵が殺到するのも時間の問題です。
Shion's eyes were swollen from crying, but she had calmed down. Satoshi's safety depended on their victory. They had to win for his sake too. And although this is a very sad situation, Satoshi was alive, and he'd be back someday. Shion understood that, but yet more tears poured from her eyes. Sis, everyone, thank you. We've succeeded over here. Someone tells me that this is probably going to keep going on for a while yet, just like in the last thing. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this here, and we can continue things in the next episode. I mean, hey, we got Tomitaki back at least, so, and we found out Satoshi is alive, so, I mean, all things considered, on top of, giving their main forces a hard time, I'd say we're doing relatively okay. Now, fingers crossed that the winds of fortune will keep blowing in our favor. Anywho, I hope you guys enjoyed this latest episode of Higurashi Munne Kurai Kai Chapter 8. If you did and you want to see more content from me, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I will see you all next time. Take care.